Kalimera, kalispera, kalinichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and sometimes wonderful world you might be, thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. It is a new week. That means we have a blank canvas to tell football stories and have great conversations. And we have the GOAT with us today. What a way to start the week. Let's rock and roll, squaddies.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Good evening. Thanks for those who are able to join live. And for most of you listening on replay, thank you so much for making the show part of your day. And those listening on our audio platforms on Apple and Spotify, be sure to leave a review, like, and subscribe. We have the absolute GOAT, one of my favorites here in the house, and he's always so generous with his time and to come back, Mr. Henry Winter. Welcome back, Henry.
Well, fantastic to see you and looking so well. I mean, the bow tie, the hat. I know the bow tie is in tribute to the late great Kevin, but you're looking well. You're always looking well.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's too kind. And yeah, we always rock the bow tie, and we're keeping the legacy alive here, Henry. And it's important to us. And it's our second season that we're kicking off without the great man. But he is part of us every single time, we go live. And I know, we were talking in the green room too about the summer and Liverpool fans and the family of Jota. I've, seen Kev's family go through a really difficult time, and it just puts things in perspective a little bit, trying not to throw the toys out the transfer pram, Henry, and keep things calm.
Yeah, well, first, good luck with that, because we know what fans are like. Fans are incredibly passionate. But I do actually think, and I mean, you mentioned Jota, and obviously Kevin and his family's thoughts are always in sort of our hearts. And the same with Jota. I mean, nothing can console those who've, when you've lost people close to you, really, words and deeds, it's great, but, nothing can truly console. But the fact that in Jota's case, in Kevin's case, the whole family of football, which is quite dysfunctional, became a family and united and supported, whether it was rivals, whether it was neighbours, whoever. I mean, it was very emotional. And for Jota's, I'll still call her wife, because widow's too strong, too heavy a word. And those three beautiful kids, those kids will grow up looking back at the Shrine, looking back on social media, and looking back at the messages from Arsenal fans, from Manchester United players and coaches turning up at the Shrine outside Anfield. And if that's consolation, which it must be, just to know that the person that they loved so much is loved by strangers throughout by people throughout the world. And the same with Kevin, and the fact that you got his bow tie there just shows that the memories continue, and these great people never truly leave us.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. Thank you, Henry. And it's always so wonderful to have Henry on. Good evening, squaddies, at ease, everyone. We're going to have it's always a great football conversation when Henry pops into Squad Central. I wanted to start with the transfer season, Henry. And do you feel like it's become this beast, to the point where, people actually debating, who's the GOAT, Fabrizio Romano, David Ornstein. There's lots of journalists that David has been on the show, and Sammy Mockbell's been on the show. You've been on the show. There's this insatiable appetite from fans for transfer content. It's as competitive a landscape as it's ever been. What's your take on the transfer market and how it's evolved to what it is in today's market?
There's always been obsession with players moving. I can remember when Malcolm McDonald moved, the whole Clive Allen saga. I mean, that was huge, but it tended to be sort of, even though that could be spread over the season, it tended to be just around, oh, they've arrived, what does it mean? And it was a sort of 48 hours of, wow, look how much he's going for, or hang on a sec, who's, Kenny Sampson, Clive Allen. I'm talking obviously sort of Arsenal ones that I sort of remember as a sort of schoolboy. But now it just seems, as you say, in industry, on its own. I mean, Fabrizio and David, I mean, David's got many qualities, but obviously he's fantastic at breaking news stories, and he will break them in a way that others would actually probably have made sort of 2,000 words of. I mean, he just puts bullet points out there, and it's just like, you know, it's amazing when he does it. And ditto with Fabrizio's. So yeah, I can understand the obsession with it. It's partly because a lot of people play fantasy football as well, and there's always that element. But yeah, ultimately for me, I mean, it's interesting. You call it the transfer season. For me, the season starts with the Community Shield, starts with the games, and the game. You know, for me, and maybe I'm a bit, you know, sort of drifting away from how modern media is. For me, the game is always about the 90 minutes. And everything stems from there. And all the transfer speculation is all about, can you enhance your ability to win in those 90 minutes? So, yeah, I understand the circus. I understand the breaking news. I understand, you know, Fabrizio and David doing amazing things. But for me, the fun starts when the whistle goes.
I think Mikel Arteta and most managers in the Premier League will probably agree with you. Mikel did his first presser in Singapore today, and you know, I don't think there's anything more annoying for a manager than to be asked. And I guess the media have to ask the question. There are a lot of fans, Henry, that say, why won't they ask him about Gyökeres? Why won't they ask him about this? And there's this fine balance, especially when you're in that press room, and how you have to kind of carve the question. And I just wanted you to kind of talk to our listeners a little bit about that, because they want to ask, that have the press ask Mikel, but as you know, it's just not as cut and dry as that, is it?
Well, they do ask him. I mean, I can absolutely assure you, I've been in enough of those press conferences recently and down the years to know that the journalists wouldn't be doing their job. I mean, look, they want to know. Knowledge is power. They want to, and particularly now that a lot of it is screened, filmed, they want to be the individual who asks that question. But remember, there's also, I don't know whether that's the case in this one, is that there will be an embargoed section, which is not always filmed, not always televised. So, you know, there's always that element. So I do laugh when fans say, why didn't you ask them about so-and-so? Look, I mean, if you've got Sammy Mockwell in there, if you've got, I don't know, Charlie Wyatt from The Sun, if you've got Sam Deans, okay, take probably the best or one of the best Arsenal reporters, Sam Dean at my old paper, The Telegraph. I absolutely guarantee he'll be asking that question, whether publicly or privately, to Mikel and to others, because they wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Arsenal and our transfer business, Henry. And the one that everyone is screaming about, of course, is Gyökeres. I think that we've strengthened. I like the goalkeeper backup. I love the signing of Norgaard. I'm a huge fan of the Madueke signing, albeit the furore that kind of came with it. I think that's calmed down a little bit now. Before we get to Gyökeres, what do you make of Arsenal's business so far this summer?
I mean, good. First, it's been early. 4 players in? And they all seem to be, everyone's talking about the money and the new players coming in, but they're effectively replacing players who are who are leaving. You know, you look at a player like Zubimendi coming in for Partey, Madueke effectively for Sterling. I do find it extraordinary, having spent time watching Madueke with England and obviously with Chelsea and the under-21s, that everyone's obsessed with him as, oh, he's back up to Saka. I mean, with great respect, no one really can be back up to Saka because he is so good. Madueke, I've seen play for England, and Tuchel really likes him. I've spoken to Tuchel privately and in press conferences about Madueke. He really likes him because of the pace, because of the directness, because of that dribbling capacity. And I've seen him, okay, he likes to play on the right and cut in on his left. I understand that. But he can quite, I mean, what was it, a third of his shots last season were with his right foot. I have seen him, his best game for England, he played 7 times for England? Best game for England was on the left wing, absolutely terrorising a very nervous right back who started out quite confidently and was soon very nervous because of that pace. So personally, I see him as an upgrade on Martinelli. I do like Martinelli, but he just simply hasn't trained on. You see game after game, you'd know more than I would. But taking a step back, Martinelli is not trained on. So Madueke, I think, can do that. And I just think, I mean, the raging reactions, as you put it there, the mayhem. I found that petition, what did it get? 5,000. I found that childish. I found it pathetic. I found it beneath the standards that Arsenal fans should expect. What sort of message does it send out to other Arsenal players who Arsenal are thinking of buying when you've got a sort of that? I don't know whether it's a split. I know the Arsenal supporters, Trust and Ackle put out tweets just saying, this doesn't represent the match-going fans. This is an online thing. I'm sure there were some match-going fans who didn't want Madueke. I understand the annoyance with continuing looking at Chelsea for players, but Madueke's a good player, and I mean I've interviewed him with England. He's really bright as well. The last time I spoke to him, I just have asked him about the fact that he'd spent part of his summer holidays just working with this skills coach. I mean, what young players are like now, they can't get a ball out without putting it out on Instagram. So what they're doing in their summer holidays. And he spent a lot of time in the close season working on improving his game. And I think that's good. And he's very bright as an individual as well as a footballer. There are elements that need finessing, but that's where Mikel and his coaching staff come in.
Yeah, I love that you've shared that with us, because on this show, we've been behind the signing from the get-go, and there are a lot of other Arsenal fans like Akil and Tom Canton and quite a few of us that saw the benefits in this. The Chelsea stigma is what got in Arsenal fans' throat. But at the same time, Kevin Hatchard was on here and he said, well, why not look at it a different way as well? And that Arsenal was so ruthless. They don't care where the player comes from. They just want the player. And it's got nothing to do kind of with the Chelsea background. I think he's going to be a star for us. And we're talking to Jason Cundy as well, and he was really bummed about losing Madueke to Arsenal. And I think of all the Chelsea players that have left, this is the one, Henry, that maybe some will admit, some will not, that they're the one that kind of got away from them.
Yeah, but Arsenal fans have to show him the love, and I'm sure they will. And if he starts delivering, I mean, remember this season, a lot of it is going to be defined by a World Cup. And you probably don't want to hear another Chelsea connection, but Thomas Tuchel will be looking at Madueke, and he will know that he can deliver on the left side because there's a space up for it on the left side. I know Rashford, one of the reasons why he wants to play at the elite level at Barcelona is because he wants that starting slot on the left for England. I look at the other players who've been linked with that side. Rodrigo would have been great. I kind of get all that. I mean, I'm sure he was Arsenal's number one target. But EZE is a fabulous player, but he's not an out-and-out left winger as Madueke can be. EZE is best as a 10, a left-sided 10. We've seen it with Palace in their 3-4-2-1. We've seen it with England when he's played sort of tucked in. He's a fantastic player, but he's more in that sort of a left-sided Odegaard position than an out flyer. Look, I love wingers, and I think it's great that Madueke is signed.
Let's, by the way, good evening, Clive Palmer in the house joining, and rightly saying that the few make a loud noise and they don't represent all of us Arsenal fans. Henry, this is the big question now with regards to Arsenal, our spend. I was talking to the listeners about a movie's never shot in the order of which it's written, and a lot of them want the striker first. They want things done in a certain order, and it just doesn't work that way. Before we kind of arc this to Gyökeres, EZE, Rodrigo. Rodrigo to me was the kind of dream Alexis Sanchez type signing, maybe ungettable in some ways, even though Graham Hunter was here and talked about how much he thought it would be a great fit for Arsenal. You've got EZE, who's just been a superstar and grown so much in the last season. Again, with Adam Wharton single-handedly probably won that FA Cup for them. And now there's the talk of Xavi Simons as well. How do you see this playing out with regards to those three in particular?
Well, those three players?
Yeah, with Xavi, EZE. To me, it seems like most Arsenal fans, the initial interest for Arsenal is EZE. Xavi Simons has kind of come on late in the game, although there was some initial conversations in June. Yeah. Rodrigo would be like the marquee signing, although I think EZE would be a marquee signing too. I don't know what you think fits or what's realistic.
I like EZE, but I think if you've got an attack of Madueke on the left, and you've got Saka on the right. Gyökeres will come in. I mean, they've sorted the agent out. It's now about the element of bonuses. And then, I mean, it's frustrating for Mikel that Gyökeres hasn't sort of come out. I mean, I know the initial, I mean, from what I've heard, his initial interest was Sesko, but Berta wanted Gyökeres. I completely understand that the Gyökeres, I think he's a fantastic player. Sesko is a work in progress, but I think Gyökeres hits the ground running. He is. So I'm just sort of talking about what your attack could be. You've got Saka on the right, you've got Odegaard, sort of tucking in as a sort of right-sided 10. You've got Gyökeres, who's a run-through striker, but can also, hold the ball up. And I don't need to tell you or any Arsenal fans listening about the club's need for a number 9. I mean, I've not been able to predict Arsenal going for the title without a number 9. I mean, it's just been, ridiculous. But that's an internal club thing. I didn't understand why it's not been. And then if you have Madueke on the left, that is quite a formidable attack. If they've got the money for an EZE, fantastic, but he's not Madueke. Rodrigo, I just think, as you say, it was a dream. I think that was always difficult, and Real Madrid to negotiate with aren't fun. So I think it's a good transfer window. And if you get Gyökeres in, who else have they've got? The Valencia centre half as well. I mean, I think
Mosquera. We spoke to Kevin Hatchard about Mosquera, and there's a lot of things to like about him. We kind of went through a little bit of, it's amazing how much he started, Henry, for such a young player. We went through some numbers, the most appearances of a player under the age of 21 in any league, and if you look at the names that are among those, and then you kind of look at his win rate. When he's got players dribbling at him, he's high number 1 on the list again, and the most minutes played by a player of his age as well. I think he's potentially very exciting for us short and long term.
Yeah, and I give myself until Christmas to have learned how to spell his Christian name, literally his Christian name, because it's every time I look at it, I'm all over the place. But yeah, I mean, he's good, and he's obviously just one for the future. But he'll obviously, judging for those figures, he'll get a few games. So I think this has been a promising window for Arsenal, particularly when Gyökeres arrives. I just think that, I mean, I know I've been on some of the Arsenal forums and I've seen the sort of frustration, and it's been expressed online that they're going out to, was it the Singapore, and they've also got the game in Tottenham, I think. Is that in Hong Kong?
Yeah,
First North London derby.
AC Milan on Wednesday, and then Hong Kong, with playing Tottenham.
There you go, your normal pre-season. And, it's frustrating that Madueke, but he needs a break after the Club World Cup. And Gyökeres will arrive, but Gyökeres will hit the ground running because he's got a point to prove to English audiences, and obviously to Arsenal fans. He wants to win them over. He wants to show he can play at this very elite level.
You talked earlier about the desire for Sesko and Berta being more in the camp of Gyökeres, and I think in the end the decision is right, because with the process, and I call it process, progress, and now it has to be success. Henry, you and I have talked about that as well before. It felt like Gyökeres was the win now guy, and Sesko was the evolutionary, player. What do you say to fans who kind of look at this as a potential Darwin Núñez moment? To me, it feels like Gyökeres was far more prolific than Darwin, and I think paid his dues, having played in England before. To me, it feels like not only is he the right player from a talent point of view, but he's also a player that's paid his dues to get to this point.
Yeah, I mean, the club will have done due diligence into his character, and I know there's tensions between him and the sporting president at the moment. The agent seemed to have sort of calmed down in terms of his demands. But I think Arsenal will know they've got a good character there as well as a good player, and that's absolutely key. It's the old All Blacks thing, no dickheads, and he very much fits into that. He's a good character, and but he's a fighter as well. And if you're going to play that number 9 role, and you've got the creative players out wide, you're going to need someone to rough up Virgil van Dijk or whoever. And I think he can do that. He's got the pace. He's 27, so he's at a good age. What's Šeško, 22, 23? I've not always been convinced with Šeško. I mean, I'm sure in 2 years' time he'll be a fantastic player, but I've never completely seen him dominate. So yeah, I think Gyökeres when he comes, but you know what it's like. We live in a world where everyone wants success now. But I think your line is absolutely spot on. We've had process at Arsenal, and now it's about success. Unfortunately, I don't want to be too gloomy. I think it's going to be such a competitive league. I mean, you look at how Liverpool have strengthened, and they'll have that extra sort of emotional element because of what happened to Jota. They will, you look at Manchester City, you can never write Manchester City off, particularly as they've got probably the best top 3, top 5 players in the world in Rodri back and fit. Chelsea have had a good end to the season. What are they going to be like? They'll probably have a dip in November. Newcastle looks like they'll hold on to Isak. It's really competitive. So if Arsenal had this maybe a year ago, this sort of transfer window in terms of quality, you would think you would sort of be more positive about them. But look, they've bought well. They've given themselves every chance, and with backing people like you, I mean, the fact that your show, the interest that it gets. I go into the ground; it's always full. I got a flat not that far from the ground, and I go into my local pub, the Hemi, and it's just like that. It's alive with Arsenal chatter, and it's not one of the closest pubs to the ground. So, Arsenal have got every reason to go into this season with confidence, but it's going to be an absolute brutal race.
Henry, I think in the past we've gotten the big. It felt like we had a marquee signing, each season. There was Ozil, you had Sanchez, you had Cazorla, and it felt like we never went that extra edge to take us over the edge. You've got all of that creative force, but we never really, strengthened the back line. Some people say, okay, Vermaelen, Koscielny, fine. I mean, they're no Saliba and Gabriel, and we've learned those lessons. And I felt like we've never quite taken it over the edge, even though we got Declan Rice. It's about Liverpool, I feel, with Ekitike, I probably could pronounce his name wrong, have taken it over the edge. Manchester City always take it over the edge. And I don't want to get into PSR and all that malarkey right now, but it's just the EZE signing will take us over the edge. And I think the narrative changes greatly in terms of Arsenal's competitiveness and the edge that we would have to really, truly compete, especially with Liverpool this season. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I 90% agree. And I'm normally 100% in agreement with you. But what does Eze do to Kai Havertz? I mean, you have to sort of remember the sort of, the impact on the dressing. I'm not a huge Kai Havertz fan. I mean, I just thought, what was it, 71 million, or however much it was. I'd much rather it had been spent on a centre forward when he came. But you're right, you need strength in depth. I mean, the season that you lost Saliba, I mean, that was a devastating blow because he didn't really have anyone to come in of his anywhere near his caliber. So absolutely, you need 22, 24, 25 serious players. But look, I was out at the under-21s and watching Nwaneri, and even though he didn't start, just watching him in training every day, watching him warm up, watching him then when he came on, you got a fabulous player there. And I don't quite know where he fits. Maybe puts pressure on Odegaard because I don't think he's an out and out wide player. You'd know better. He looks to me like he's an attacking 8 or a 10. But it's not always about bringing players in from the outside. Look at Miles Lewis-Skelly. He's probably England's starting left back now. Is Dowman actually gone on tour as well?
He is. He's on the tour.
There you go, and there are others. I mean, the importance. I mean, I'm very fond of Hale End. I think that's great for PSR reasons. And you mentioned PSR, but Arsenal are a club which actually will respect PSR and will, they're ones with American owners who will say, right, we are going to do things by the book, which Liverpool done. They didn't spend anything last year apart from 10 minutes on a striker they're now trying to offload. And they pooled their money. And I think Arsenal are spending now. So what is it, 123 million so far? They've probably got a few quid in from players outgoing, certainly saving on wages. And then if Eze, I agree with you, if Eze comes in, but he's not a left winger. That's all I can say on Eze. You know, he can play out there, but he's not a left winger. Maybe if Lewis-Skelly flies around the outside of him, but you know, it's not Madueke versus Eze. I think that argument needs clarifying.
Would you see the, you know, and I agree with you about Nwaneri, and there were concerns when he wasn't starting for England in the under-21 tournament. But to hear you talk about his training, I saw that in the tour last summer with him and Miles Lewis-Skelly, the way they conducted themselves, the way they trained, the way they behave in front of the media. I mean, they're so mature, and you've got that kind of Halen built backbone, you know, training, whether it's football wise or it's, you know, football smarts wise and stuff. Do you feel that Eze, because I think one of the things is a lot of, to hear Arsenal fans say we've spent 65 million for Havertz, I think it was. But to hear people talk about the money for Madueke, why are we spending that much on a backup when for the last 4 or 5 seasons I've heard them just moan about how Man City can bring £100 million player off the bench? I mean, the hypocrisy is rife. And so with Nwaneri being able to maybe play in the 10 role, I know that Mikel prefers him rather than being on the right, is what is being reported, Henry. You've got Odegaard, who didn't have a great season, a lot of mileage on his legs. Maybe Eze can deputise in that 10 role. I think there's room for everyone in the modern game when so much is being asked of players and we're going to be competing in 4 major competitions.
And you'll have injuries, you'll have suspensions. Arsenal seem to pick up a lot of suspensions. Be nice if referees smiled on you this season. Absolutely, you know, you want a big squad, but you know it's a balance. You know, if you've got a Nwaneri in there, I mean, Odegaard needs pressure on him. I mean, he's a fantastic representative for the club, but Declan Rice is your leader in that team. Eze absolutely comes in, but I mean, you know, just coming back to your point about Madueke, and you weren't alleging this, but there is this perception we have spent 50 million on a backup. Well, first there is an England tax which adds 10-15% to everything, and may kick in with Eze if negotiations get lively. But Madueke, I wouldn't consider him a backup. I mean, I've seen him as an England international who can absolutely take on right backs and will stretch on the left almost as well, and no one can do it as well as Saka, but will provide that on the left that Saka does on the right. He's not back up to Saka.
I think that we also have been screaming out for competition in every position. And, you know, we saw Martinelli, you know, little fire lit under his arse when Trossard came in. Benjamin White with Timber coming in, who's very versatile, although he was injured last season. Miles Lewis-Skelly by default getting a spot with the injuries that happened at left back. But when you kind of rattle off, you got Timber, you got Benjamin White, you got Saliba, you got Big Gabby, you've got Kepa, you've got Raya, you've got Miles Lewis-Skelly, Calafiori, Zubimendi, Odegaard, Mikel Merino, Declan Rice, Lewis-Skelly, who can also play in midfield, Trossard, who might be going, but Martinelli, Madueke, Havertz, Gyökeres, Saka, Nwaneri. I mean, that's a good squad. And I think, especially with Mikel wanting Madueke, Henry, is he under the biggest pressure of his tenure going into this season? What do you make of what Mikel has to do?
I love all these questions, asking elite athletes, men or women, whether they feel under pressure. The biggest pressure is what they put on themselves, because they are at the top, because they are so driven. I think if you look at Mikel, whether in matches or you talk to anyone who's worked with him at Manchester City or at Arsenal, or you talk to the players. I remember I had a long conversation with Raheem Sterling about why he felt that Mikel Arteta would go to Arsenal, ostensibly as he was a number 2 under Pep, but could be a number 1. And he spoke about the quality of his coaching, how driven he is. I mean, all the best managers are obsessed. I mean,
Mm.
I mean, Klopp was obsessed, but he was he's an extrovert with it. Ferguson, absolutely obsessed. Wenger, as obsessed as anyone. I remember it was I think it was either his 50th or his 55th birthday, and we were down at Colney, and we said, were you going to celebrate your birthday? It's a big birthday. And he said, no, 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 no. And he said, come on, Arsene, you've got to sort of celebrate your birthday. And he said, no, there's a Bundesliga reserves team game that I really want to watch, so I'll be staying in and watching that. And he said, but maybe for you, I'll put some candles on top of the television. And and he was joking, but he probably did do it. He could probably tell you all the stats of the Bayer Leverkusen kit man and reserves. But they're like that. So look, coming back to your point, it is a good point. There is pressure on Mikel Arteta, but he will be putting on himself. When he goes home, I can't imagine he just sort of unwinds and puts Netflix on. He will be going through the videos after every game. These individuals are absolutely obsessed, and that's why they're at the top, why they're so driven.
Yeah, I remember when we had Rebecca Lowe on, and she was talking about the times that she's interviewed Arteta too. So she imagines his daily to-do list is Arsenal, 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 the wife and kids, and those are the sacrifices that you have to make. I get it. It may be a naive question on my part. Of course, he's under pressure and puts himself under pressure. I think the one misconception is this idea that the owners don't want or don't care about winning, or are just obsessed with monetization and monetizing the game. Henry, I've defended the Cronkies a lot, and clearly they've invested in Mikel, in the team, in the side. From someone who's a little closer to everything, I mean, I find this narrative, lazy.
Yeah, I mean, first rule of Americans, they like winning. And winning brings in more money. I actually think that, I wasn't a huge fan of the Cronkies, but I actually think in the last sort of 2 years or so, you can't, they've backed a good manager. They're now backing him, obviously, financially. But yeah, I think you're in a good place when you get Gyökeres in. There's been nothing wrong with Arsenal under Arteta. That a number 9, recruiting a number 9 earlier wouldn't have sorted out. I mean, I would say the only thing I would, not that he would necessarily listen to me, but I think some of his utterances in press conferences, I mean, just have a little bit of sort of self-awareness when you say these things.
Humility.
Yeah, a bit of humility. Congratulate the others. I mean, look, the best managers are those who are absolutely driven to win. But you can do it with a little bit, even Ferguson congratulated Wenger. I mean, I wrote a book with Dalglish, and the letter that Ferguson wrote to Dalglish, probably about 300, 400 words, beautiful words, congratulating him on winning the title with Blackburn when Manchester United was so close. I mean, you can do it with a bit of class. So acknowledge others. But look, it's not Arteta's job to keep fans of opposing clubs happy. It's to keep Arsenal fans happy, and he can do that with the results.
Yeah, I didn't like his presses towards the end of last season. I thought it was arrogance, and of course you're going to be, being in that position, you've got to have a level of cocky confidence and arrogance, of course, and be a Rottweiler. But it was clearly PSG were the best team in that competition, and there's some of the waffling on Liverpool and the points. And I think the reason why you can say that if you're Ferguson or Wenger or Klopp is because you've got the pedigree of winning big trophies. And I believe Mikel acts as though he has, and he hasn't. And that's what irks some Arsenal fans and opposing fans. That's what gets their back up.
Yeah, and that's why this is a big season for him. But I mean, he's intelligent enough to know that he'll have people around him. I don't think he's completely cut off from the fans' narrative. I mean, I think some of the fans' narrative when it's over the top, I mean, he probably sort of blanks that out, but he knows that this is a huge season. And I think Arsenal fans, certainly from what I can detect, so from inside the ground, are incredibly supportive. I mean, you hear the song, so he will appreciate that. But I think he probably does owe the fans I mean, this is a big season. I think it's just unfortunate that it's just going to be an absolute. I mean, it's just going to be like the sort of, one of the opening of the Harrod Sale with everyone running through with their elbows up, trying to get through to the China department before everyone else. Because I think it's just going to be sorry, that was someone who you said that was what I did for 5 summers as a student. So yeah, look, it is going to be a difficult title race. But look, he is giving himself all the chances. The fact you just read out a squad list, and I was going, yeah, he's good.
I miss Norgaard, by the way, Henry. I miss Norgaard.
Do you know what? Can I tell you something about Norgaard? Okay,
yeah,
so I
please.
got to know Thomas Frank quite well, and I went to Brentwood, Stuart Robson, Brentford training to see Thomas. We just have lunch. This was like early last year, and they were out training, and I just sort of waited in sort of like the boot area for when the players came in. And it was fascinating because Thomas Frank was in the corner, but every one of those players was dissecting training, and Norgaard was right in the middle of it. You've got a leader there, you've got a captain there, you've got probably a potential manager. I don't know what he wants to do long term. He may have already started his coaching journey or coaching badges. Very intelligent individual. And I just think he will, look, you've got a lot of good midfielders, but I thought that was a really cute signing for, I know he's 31,
yes,
but what was it, 12, 13 million? I mean, in the current market, I think that is just for a proven international performer, really intelligent, who will slot in, who will come off the bench, have an influence immediately. I think it's very clever.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's exactly the type of play that we needed. When you looked at our bench, especially, last season, it was really weak, and taking minutes off legs of players who've just been totally played out and exhausted. Norgaard comes in, and Natalie Sawyer, who's a huge Brentford fan, as you know, and who you've worked with, gave us this debrief on him too, having watched him week in, week out. I think Arsenal fans will look back, Henry, on this signing, maybe mid-season, maybe come February, March time, and be like, oh, wow, what a signing. I think that's going to be Norgaard. Whether it's mid-season or towards the end of the season, I think Arsenal fans will realise the value of that signing. And really,
he's got a great pass on him. You're going to get the work ethic, you're going to get the leadership without the armband, but he can thread a pass as well. So the forwards will enjoy him.
What haven't I asked you about the transfer market that you want to kind of let us know about? We talked a little bit about Liverpool, of course, have strengthened. Manchester City, everyone knew they would reboot. You touched on Newcastle, the importance of them keeping Isaac. Aston Villa, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say is that I hope the promoted clubs invest intelligently. I mean, Sunderland clearly are. Well, they're certainly spending, not huge amounts. Leeds United are spending, again, not huge amounts, and they're going to lose 1 or 2 players. Burnley look like they're going to lose Trafford. I just think from a neutral's perspective, I want to see one of the promoted clubs stay up, because I don't think it's healthy for the Premier League or the EFL just to have this yo-yo. Okay, 1 or 2, Norwich come up, they go back down again. But for all 3, like last season, it's just not healthy for the game.
I agree with that. Anyone who fell by the wayside last season that you can see rising this coming season? I mean, in particular, the 2 worst big teams last season, Manchester United and Tottenham.
Well, you're about to get the striker that Manchester United want to need in Gyökeres, who scored, I think 70 goals in 70 games playing for Ruben Amorim. He'd be absolutely perfect for that 3-4-2-1 system. But you've got him. So I think Manchester United will, they've still got, they got Rashford out the door. They've still got 4 other wide players out the door to get rid of. There's still question marks over Onana. They need a mobile central midfielder. I mean, if 1 or 2 Arsenal fans are sort of fretting about your transfer window, go on a Manchester United fans forum, and it's a lot of it's in meltdown. You'll be typing with oven gloves on just to keep your fingers safe. It is yeah, I mean, Manchester United are, a complete mess in terms of their recruitment, the owners. So I know every club just looks very much, within their four walls. But Arsenal having a very good summer. Arsenal and Liverpool are having great summers compared to others.
I've got a couple more for you before I get to that. Do you see any shocking transfers coming? Do you feel like there's still a rabbit to come out of the hat for one of the clubs? And Arsenal and listeners just joining, if you rest assured, Henry's telling us here, and nothing's a guarantee, but Gyökeres will happen. Hopefully, don't panic. Okay, but Henry, do you see any big surprises?
Yeah, I do, because clubs clubs are worried. Clubs are going to have to invest. I mean, what do we know? We've got a fair way before the window closes, so that Sky Sports yellow splash across the bottom of the page will be very vivid. Yeah, absolutely. There'll be a lot more money spent, and you'll get one that moves, and then it'll move others. And Manchester United are obviously trying to get rid of players, but also bring players in. I mean, if you say that Mikel Arteta is under pressure, Ruben Amorim's probably under more pressure, and he's been there probably a tenth of the time. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there'll be shocks.
I can't let you go without talking about Arsenal women, in particular, the super subs that came on and changed the game for the Lionesses. Chloe Kelly, 3 minutes of just pure magic. Michelle Ajamang, I mean, a superstar in the making. Bethany, just the grit of that player. She's so special coming on. And of course, Hannah Hampton, heroics, not an Arsenal player, but also Arsenal, the picture of Wheatley and Olivia Smith breaking records of transfers as well. Firstly, the Lionesses and the Arsenal impact, and what you're seeing. You're covering the tournament, Henry.
I mean, I've been sort of covering it from afar, purely out of interest. I mean, I've interviewed Leah Williamson, I've interviewed Alessia Russo, and I think these are players, and you can say this about a lot of the Lionesses, who transcend the sport. And I mean, I write a lot, writing a book on sport generally, and the issue of childhood obesity and what it means to the sort of the national teams by the lack of investment in state schools, and what it means for England long-term men's and women's, and how more investment is needed. And then you see someone like Leah Williamson, you see someone like Alessia Russo, and you see what role models they are, and you see that particularly in Leah's case, where she would send messages to politicians, as she did after winning the Euros with Lotta. And so I see them as footballers, and obviously I want to see them progress, because I always want to see England do well. But I also see them as game changers in society. And I think in a world, without getting too political, where we're looking for leaders with integrity and authority and dynamism and an ability to make things happen, I actually think that, the Lionesses, look, in the last 24 hours, the way that Lucy Bronze spoke so rationally, so eloquently about the issues and addressing the racism that Jess Carter had endured, and other players will have endured. Lauren James in recent tournaments, Bukayo Saka at the end of the last Euros, the Euros before last. These women are not just winning games and tournaments; they are actually making politicians in Whitehall think. And they're going in and seeing them, and they're knocking on doors, and they're saying, "You've got to change. We need to invest more in school sport." We've also now got to address racism. I hope the social media companies are listening after the abuse that they got. I mean, the abuse that Jadon Sancho, Bukayo Saka, and Marcus Rashford got after missing their penalties. Brave guys. Walked forward, probably didn't have enough of a warm-up, certainly two of them in terms of extra time, and then the abuse that they got. And I saw what Rashford got privately. The abuse was just absolutely shocking. And I'm a middle-aged white guy. I have it's just horrendous. So look, fair play to the Lionesses. So absolutely, I want to see them win tricky game with Italy, probably Spain in the final. I'd love to see them win that, but it makes me proud to see that they're trying to change society as well as games.
I think the women's game does that really well. Having covered the US women's national team for so long, they've been trailblazers on and off the pitch as well. You touched on Rashford real quick. I have to ask you this while I have you, Henry. I know you've got to duck out. You're busy with a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the things that left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I think these women, Leah Williamson, if she wins another tournament as England captain, what is her legacy going to be? What is all of their legacies going to be? And we're watching young players trying to build their legacy on the pitch. And Miles Lewis-Skelly's treatment last season left a really bad taste in my mouth and in quite a few other Arsenal fan and opposing fans' mouths. You see these contrasting stories of, Grealish goes out, gets drunk. Oh, he's Jack the Lad. Oh, we need to cherish him, I think was an article in the Daily Mail. Miles Lewis-Skelly, he made some bad decisions on the pitch, but for most part, was a revelation and a player that we should celebrate. Same thing with Bellingham. I know he has an attitude and he's competitive and passionate, but I felt I did this piece on Sky where I was like, why aren't we celebrating these two players instead of trying to kind of bring them down? Did you feel that way?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and we certainly went through it with Raheem Sterling and Tosin at Chelsea when he was at Manchester City, and he got a lot of stick in the media for going out and buying his mother a house. And I spoke to him about it, and I thought, well, fair play to him, because he's not wasting it on gambling or whatever. He's bought his mother a house, and the criticism was, he hasn't even played for the first team. And I thought it was a bit unfair because it was comparing him with Phil Foden as well, and Phil Foden was far more advanced than his career. Fast forwarding to the current debate, I've had the privilege of meeting Miles Lewis-Skelly's mother. And she has brought up a good kid who just, if his issues are on the pitch, then great. He's a winner. I can understand why Haaland and maybe Manchester City fans were a little bit upset, but you know what? Let's not hammer the character out of players. Because if you hammer the character out of the players, they often don't express their skills so much. And that's one thing I was worried about Madueke. Would he express himself so much? Would he be a little bit cautious and maybe lay the first ball off when he starts for Arsenal because he's worried that people are watching him? Let them breathe, let them play, let them be like they're back in the playground and express themselves. I've been covering England for 30 years and I've seen good players step up on that stage and then just acquire these inhibitions because they're so worried about the pressure, the focus, what are people going to say online, in the media, people like me maybe having a go at them. Let them play, let them breathe. Okay, they'll make mistakes. And just finally on Jude Bellingham, I know that probably the English media, and he probably got one or two issues to sort out, and that will probably be sorted out by the FA and by his family eventually. But I love a player with that edge. I quite like a player who comes in and calls it on with the press. I like that. I've seen too many players just be bowed down under the pressure of the media, and I've seen Bellingham keep England in the tournament. And if occasionally he wants to be a bit moody with the press, fine.
I like that. And it's a World Cup year as well, Henry. And I think that makes the league maybe potentially even more exciting. Everyone's going to be, a lot of people say, players will just play to protect themselves like towards the end of the season. You said earlier, these are competitors, pressure's on, they want to win. We're going into a World Cup year. And, for Arsenal, you've got Bukayo Saka, you've got Madueke, you've got Declan Rice, you've got Miles Lewis-Skelly. It's really exciting for us to kind of have, I don't care what anyone says, I love having an English claw at my North London club.
Well, yeah, because it's good for the club. Can you imagine the buzz around Arsenal next season, the following season after the World Cup, if Bukayo Saka walks out for the first game with the World Cup winners medal around his neck? The whole place will go crazy. The whole of the whole area will go crazy. So yeah, that'd be absolutely brilliant. To be honest, I don't buy this argument about players easing up going into a World Cup summer, because they know the coaches are watching them. And if you look at England now, England probably got about 40 players that they can pick from, come down to 26. There's competition for places. Look, Declan Rice is going to be in the team, let alone in the squad. Ditto Bukayo Saka. Miles Lewis-Skelly probably, although Livramento and Lewis Hall will put a little bit of pressure on him. But yeah, absolutely. There are Madueke. I mean, he needs a good end to the. Well, he needs a good season to sort of to make sure that Thomas Tuchel picks him. So absolutely, and I think that the competition for places in the international teams will help Arsenal.
Yeah. And Olivia Smith, we've got to end on another positive note, because the women's game that you cover and you champion a lot, a star signing from Liverpool, 1 million, breaks the Naomi Girma record, a very exciting young player. And, some people say, well, how's this going to change the women's game? Well, maybe the same way Trevor Francis transfer changed the men's game, Henry.
Yeah, and she's a penny more because Trevor was just a penny under. Again, that's the direction of travel. I don't need to tell you that. I think it's fantastic, and I went for lunch with Vinay when he left Arsenal, and just before he left Arsenal, and one of the things we were talking about was just the two of us off the record lunch in Islington. I was just saying to him, the Arsenal women's team are gonna miss you, and not simply the Arsenal women's team. And in fairness, they've done amazingly since with trophies and then this signing, but just the women's game generally. And I think Arsenal have done so much for women's football in this country. And Vinay, when he was at Arsenal, when he was at Premier League meetings, and I hope he continues doing this now. He's another part of North London, to actually keep promoting the game. And I think it's wonderful that Arsenal are having more and more games actually in the stadium. It shouldn't be considered the men's stadium. It should be considered the main stadium. And I think, the final thing I'll say on this, these pitches are so good now, the coaches who get worried about, another game being on it, digging it up, well, it doesn't. These Desso pitches are strong enough to cope with both teams.
Well, we really appreciate you, Henry. Please follow at Henry Winter. Over 1.3 million of you already are. What's your parting shot? Our guest gets an exit, 30 seconds. What would you like to leave the squaddies with this evening?
Just believe in Arteta, back the players, give Madueke a chance, because players are human beings. They're flesh and blood. They have issues like the rest of us. We've seen more and more players, and Arsenal have been very good on this, talking about their own personal issues. So just remember that they are human beings. They're not robots. So support them, and they will go out and deliver for you.
Brilliant. I will leave it at that, squaddies. Make sure you hit the like button. Leave your comments in the YouTube section. Let us know what you think. And again, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, subscribe and leave a review. You can catch Henry. Are you going to be on TalkSport this week, Sky? Any place the squaddies can catch you?
Anywhere, anyone that will have me.
All right, everyone, at ease. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them, and look out on the community page for the live show. All right. See you.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.